Ask any eye doctor on the planet what's wrong with your vision, and they'll ask you the same question opticians have been asking for 700 years. What's your prescription? That's the wrong question. The real one is why your eyeball grew the wrong shape in the first place, and whether anyone can stop it before it finishes growing. I went looking through Chinese ophthalmology journals expecting a marketing story, and what I found instead was a 15-year research program quietly answering that second question. Here's how 3 minutes of red light aimed at the back of a child's eye might be doing something no lens has ever done, and why the same country running the experiment is now racing to control how fast it spreads. Every pair of glasses on Earth solves the same problem the same way. Bend the light before it hits the eye. That idea is at least 7 centuries old. It traces back to convex lenses, ground by glassworkers in northern Italy in the late 1200s. Since then, we've split atoms and mapped the genome, and the eyewear industry still runs on that one unchanged trick. Here's the part that gets skipped over. A prescription doesn't fix an eye. It's a workaround, and a leaking pipe analogy makes the workaround obvious. Putting a bucket under a drip instead of fixing the pipe. The bucket empties, you empty it again, the leak never stops. That's a yearly eye exam. Your prescription creeps up, you get a new lens, and the underlying problem is never touched. The underlying problem has a name. Myopia isn't primarily a lens disease, it's a shape disease. A normal eyeball is close to spherical. A myopic eyeball has stretched too long front to back, like a marble slowly pulled into an olive, so incoming light lands in front of the retina instead of on it. The longer that stretch continues, the worse the blur gets, and until recently, nothing widely available could touch the stretching itself. The scale of it is not small. Global myopia prevalence went from roughly 23% of the world's population in 2000 to about 34% by 2020, and researchers publishing in the journal Ophthalmology Project, close to half the planet, nearly 5 billion people, could be affected by 2050. If the actual defect is architectural, the obvious next question is whether that architecture can be controlled from the outside. The first real clue came from something almost embarrassingly low-tech. Retinal tissue develops something like a plant does. It needs a certain dose of full-spectrum light exposure to grow correctly, and a fluorescent-lit classroom is basically keeping that plant in a closet. In 2015, a research team at Zhongshan Ophthalmic Center, part of Sun Yat-sen University in Guangzhou, tested that idea directly. Add a 40-minute outdoor class to the school day and track what happens to myopia onset over 3 years, published in JAMA. Kids who got the extra 40 minutes outside developed new myopia at a meaningfully lower rate than the control group. Follow-up work ruled out the obvious guesses. It wasn't the exercise, and it wasn't distance from screens. It was the light itself. Indoor lighting, even a well-lit room, delivers somewhere around 300 to 500 lux. Outdoor daylight, even under clouds, delivers 10,000 lux or more. That's not a small gap. It's a full order of magnitude. That single finding reframed the entire field. If raw light exposure was doing something protective to the back of the eye, the next question wrote itself. Instead of waiting on weather and school schedules to deliver that dose, could you isolate the effective wavelength and deliver it directly in a controlled clinical setting? That question is where repeated low-level red light therapy, RLRL, actually starts. Picture the sclera, the tough white outer shell of the eyeball, as a retaining wall holding back a hillside. Starve that wall of blood flow and oxygen, and it slowly weakens and gives way, letting the hillside creep forward. Feed it properly, and it holds its shape. That's roughly what RLRL is aiming at, according to the published mechanism. The device itself is unremarkable to look at, a small desktop unit with 2 eyepieces, each containing a low-power semiconductor laser diode tuned to about 650 nanometers, deep red, far weaker than any surgical laser. A child looks in for exactly 3 minutes, twice a day, several days a week. Inside the retina and the choroid behind it, that wavelength strikes an enzyme called cytochrome C oxidase inside the cell's mitochondria, which measurably increases the cell's oxygen use and energy output. That boosts blood flow through the choroid, the vascular layer feeding the sclera, and a better-fed sclera is less prone to the stretching that drives myopia forward. Feed the wall and the wall holds. A multi-center randomized trial out of Zhongshan Ophthalmic Center, published in Ophthalmology in 2022 and covering 264 children over 12 months, found RLRL therapy cut the rate of axial elongation, the actual physical stretching researchers used to track myopia, by 69.4% compared with standard single-vision glasses. A meaningful share of children didn't just slow down, their eyes measured shorter at the end of the study than at the start. That's not managing the symptom, that's partial reversal of the underlying shape. It reads like a clean win, until you ask who's actually selling the device, and what happens when a therapy this promising scales faster than the people regulating it can keep up. Once a result like that gets published, manufacturing follows fast, and RLRL followed the same pattern as an unregulated supplement boom. multiple companies rushing out devices at inconsistent power levels before anyone locked in a shared safety standard. Independent researchers found some of those devices exceeded internationally recognized limits for safe retinal light exposure. China's own regulator responded by tightening, not loosening. In 2024, the National Medical Products Administration reclassified RLRL devices from Class 2 to Class 3, the country's highest device tier, which now requires manufacturers to run far more extensive safety studies, including long-term tissue analysis, before any new device reaches the market. One clinical device tied to the original trials, developed by Suzhou Shuangjia Optoelectronics Technology and marketed internationally as iRising, is reported to be in daily use by over 100,000 people in China and has cleared regulatory approval in Australia, the UK, the EU, Japan, and New Zealand. It has not been cleared by the FDA, and no large-scale US trial has been announced. And it turns out one of the people who sits closest to that entire commercial rollout is also the scientist who ran the original clinical trial. Professor Mingguang He, based at Zhongshan Ophthalmic Center, is listed as principal investigator on the core RLRL clinical trials and holds the original patent on the underlying red light technology. Publicly disclosed conflict of interest filings from a 2022 Chinese ophthalmology expert consensus also list him as a director and equity holder in Suzhou Shuangjia Optoelectronics and iRising International. The company's now selling the device his own trials validated. That's not unusual for medical innovation, where inventors frequently commercialize what they discover, but it does mean the same hands that produce the data are the same hands that stand to gain from how fast the market believes it. China isn't running this research as a side project. National survey data puts myopia above 80% among students finishing high school, with some eastern cities closer to 90%, and Beijing has classified childhood myopia as a national public health priority backed by government campaign-level resources, not a $5 lens inconvenience. RLRL isn't even the only front. In March 2024, regulators approved China's first commercially manufactured low-dose atropine eye drop for childhood myopia control, made by Shenyang-based Xingqi Pharmaceutical, reportedly pulling in over 2.47 billion yuan, roughly $362 million in a single fiscal year. Outdoor time mandates, red light devices, and pharmaceutical eye drops are three separate lines of attack on the same target. The people with the most to lose from any of this working are the ones least likely to fund it. Prescription lenses, contact lenses, and the retail infrastructure around them make up a global eyewear market valued above $180 billion and projected to nearly double over the next decade. No company selling frames has a business reason to fund a treatment that shrinks its own customer base, which is exactly why this research is coming out of government-funded university hospitals in China rather than optical retailers anywhere else. This isn't a story about glasses disappearing next year, or China simply beating the rest of the world to a cure. Billions of adults already have stable myopia these childhood interventions won't touch, and US and European regulatory approval is still years out. The actual finish line isn't eliminating corrective lenses everywhere on Earth. It's getting a low-cost, non-surgical intervention into national health systems while a child's eyes are still growing, being first to scale prevention, not first to a miracle. If you want to see more breakdowns like this, you can support the channel directly on Ko-fi. Links in the description. Every bit helps me keep digging into these stories. That's what's really happening under the hood. I'm Arthur. Stay smart.